Hello, thank you for joining us for our Wednesday webinar here at the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. And today we're going to be talking about home ownership. June is National Homeownership Month, so that's kind of a time to celebrate all the benefits of owning a home. And today we kind of want to cover a wide range of topics. So just kind of a variety of things that might be able to help you protect your investment. And here's a quick little roadmap for our presentation today. I'll give you a quick overview of SCDCA, who we are, and how we might be able to help you. We'll go over home loans, maybe as first-time home buyer, or if you're thinking about moving, we'll discuss some of those little tips to keep in mind as you look at those home loans. Next, we'll consider home warranties. Then we'll get into title fraud, and it's something we're asked about very often here at SCDCA, so we'll go over some basics that may help you get some answers to those questions you have about those. We will go over some things with homeowners associations. This is going to be a very quick look at what to know kind of before you buy. And it's kind of important to note with that too, we have several presentations that delve just kind of specifically into HOAs that our attorneys give those presentations. So today we're just going to cover a few basics of things to kind of consider about when you're looking for a home and kind of how to file a complaint that may involve an HOA. And then we'll kind of finish up on some home repair scams and things to keep in mind whenever you're hiring a contractor. And of course, consumer.sc.gov is our website. And kind of the best place to look is that little How Do I button that's there in the center of the screen. And that will get you pointed to a lot of the resources that we just mentioned quickly. Now we want to kind of get into our first topic on home ownership. And of course, that's kind of things that you might want to consider if you're looking into getting a home loan. And before you start applying for loans, you're kind of encouraged to go through your credit report first. And it's going to give you an idea of kind of how your finances look and might also give you those signs of identity theft as well. And you want to make sure all that information that's listed on there is complete. And you also kind of want to make sure you recognize phone numbers, addresses, and accounts that are going to be listed on there. And if you have any loans in your name, it should tell you how to, it should give you those total amounts that those loans are for, kind of how much the balance is and those kinds of things. Again, you always kind of want to look through that and make sure everything belongs to you and make sure it's all accurate. And if you find errors, there will be instructions on those websites for the major credit bureaus to be able to report those errors or those things that may not be right. And of course, that's all going to give you signs for possible identity theft. And all this information that's kind of compiled in those credit reports are all things that companies are going to look at when they're considering giving you a home loan or any other type of loan, really. So you kind of want to do this, well ahead of time. So if you find any of those errors or things that you might want to kind of work on, if it's, things that you have going on with your own credit history, you want to do that ahead of time so you can kind of make those adjustments before you apply for those loans. And we recommend using annualcreditreport.com to pull these credit reports, and it will give you access to Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. That website used to be available once a year for these free credit reports, but now they can offer those every week to you. And there are federal laws that kind of implement what information they can use about you and direct you towards with that website. So that's kind of why we recommend annualcreditreport.com. Other sites might be set up to kind of get different information about you and sell you products and things like that. And again, you want to check the reports at least once a year, if not a little bit more frequently, and you want to look for inaccuracies and those signs for identity theft. And it is kind of important to note that annualcreditreport.com is not going to give you access to your credit score, but it will list out all those things in your credit history and kind of give you all those details that creditors might be looking at whenever they pull up your details. So kind of one of the first things that you might want to think about whenever you're applying for a home loan is, can you pay for it? You only want to consider taking on debt if you spend less than you take home. And you also want to take time to kind of figure out what you can afford as far as monthly payments and that type of stuff. And I have a little resource here, and I didn't mention it earlier, but you should be able to kind of click into that chat box. Either should be at the top of your screen or the bottom, depending on how you have Zoom. But if you've downloaded the slides, they should be in that little chat box. And this graphic will give you a direct link to our website. And I'm going to hover over it here. Hopefully you can see that. But the PDF that we have for these slides will kind of take you directly to this document on our website. And it's kind of a little page that will just kind of show you a quick thing that you can do figuring out that monthly take-home pay and kind of what you might need to do as far as that spending plan. As far as your monthly take-home pay, that's going to be, how much you have left after taxes and those deductions. And then you want to subtract the amount you need for your monthly spending and your saving goals, expenses, credit payments, things like that. And that remaining balance is going to give you the maximum you can afford to put toward the new mortgage payment. And you can use those columns on the right to kind of show that new payment. And then you can kind of make adjustments and kind of figure out how things will go with that new home. And it's going to kind of give you a better idea if you can afford that new mortgage payments, and maybe you might need to make some changes and things, and just kind of give you a better understanding of what those projected expenses may be. And once you've done that, you kind of want to consider thinking about, knowing what type of loan you might be thinking about taking to determine if you can make those future payments. And some things to kind of keep in mind as you're doing all that. So you don't want to sign a contract till you've read everything. All your questions are answered and all the blanks are filled in on those contracts. That's kind of an important step. You don't want to have any of those blanks in there, so you know everything that's on that document before you sign it. And you want to make sure that the loan payments and those terms are all the things that you were quoted and then you've discussed, in person, over the phone, things like that. So you want to make sure everything is written in those documents. And keep in mind too that you can lose your home if you do not make those payments on your mortgage or that equity loan. So that's kind of that important step in there. Just kind of keep in mind that, if you're not making those payments and making them on time, you might possibly lose your home. Some other quick things to keep in mind as you're looking at that. You also have a right to cancel a credit transaction or a refinance or consolidated loan within 3 business days of the closing. And you also have the right to change your mind on the home purchase or that mortgage loan at any time prior to the closing. So those are all kind of important things to keep in mind too as you're looking at a new home. And one place that's kind of got some good resources that I want to make sure folks are aware of is the SC Housing website. They've got a lot of things available for home buyers. A lot of times they're tied to various federal, state funding. So the availability kind of may fluctuate, just kind of depending on how much money they have left in those pots. So if a lot of people have already claimed, those loans and those things that they have to offer, that money may not be there. So you always kind of want to check in, see if that money is available, and, put in those applications as soon as you can. And again, SC Housing, their website has a lot of these programs on their websites. It might be for first-time home buyers. Some of their other programs are very specific for certain counties that they're trying to encourage home ownership in. So schousing.sc.gov is their website. And again, if you download those slides, you should be able to click on there, and that's going to take you directly to their link. And I'll kind of share some of these links at the end of the presentation as well for you. And it's also kind of important to note they also have some programs available for low-income folks who might need to make repairs to their home. So if you've got some important things that you need to fix on a home or somebody that does, that might be a good place for them to check as well. And if you're finding yourself kind of having trouble paying that mortgage payment, kind of the first step that you want to do is contact your lender and kind of explain what's going on with your situation and why those payments might be late. Sometimes they might work with you depending on who that lender is. So that's kind of why that important first step there. You want to kind of have that conversation with them, kind of see what they might be able to offer. And you also kind of want to know some of the options that you may have. Forbearance may be one. That's when the lender postpones foreclosure, tries to give you a little more time to get those payments together. Mortgage modification programs may be an option. There may be something where you can get some help selling your home before the foreclosure happens, all these things. And consider refinancing as well to put you in a better position than you are now. And that can kind of help you out with those payments, getting you a payment that's a little bit easier to make. And of course, you can contact an approved housing counseling agency. HUD.gov is a good resource to check. And we always encourage folks to kind of watch out for scammers. They have access to a lot of public records, so they may know if a foreclosure or something like that is coming along, and they may give you some kind of false promises, try to offer you fake assistance in stopping or preventing those foreclosures. So keep that in mind. You always kind of want to go through legitimate sources that you trust for all of those details and beware of those scams that are out there. Now I kind of want to get a little bit into home warranties. And it is kind of important to note that a home warranty is really a service contract. So in our state, they're regulated by the South Carolina Department of Insurance. And it's a little bit different than a builder's warranty, which is kind of set up for a newly built home. But home warranty is generally going to cover those replacement and repairs on things like appliances, air conditioning systems, things like that. And it's something that you decide to get. It does not come with your home, and you cannot be required to buy it. So according to the South Carolina Department of Insurance, no bank, lending institution, manufacturer, or seller of any product can require you to purchase a service contract that's going to be a condition of that loan or a condition of the sale of any property. So if you're getting those types of things, you may want to consider getting in touch with the South Carolina Department of Insurance and kind of having those conversations with them about that. All right, so before you purchase a home warranty, you'll kind of want to consider some of these things. Is it likely to save you money? Now, you want to consider both the upfront cost and the cost that may be hidden. That could be things like deductibles, fees, things that you need to pay each time that you use that service. You also kind of want to look at the limitations of that home warranty. Are there limits on the amounts that you can be reimbursed? Is accidental damage covered? Or certain appliances or systems not included? So you want to look at those restrictions and fees for cancellation, all of those variety of types of things. And you also kind of want to ask yourself, does the claim process seem difficult or slow? If you have to wait a long time to get paid back, that might kind of reduce that value of having coverage for you. So kind of look into how long those types of processes may take. Then you kind of want to ask yourself, does the company have a good reputation? You always kind of want to do those searches online. You know, you probably, if you've been on our webinars, you've heard this say, you know, before, do those searches online, put those words like review or complaint at the end of the name of that company, kind of see what other people may be saying online. And that's going to give you a better idea of maybe how reliable that service is, or how trustworthy that company is, or kind of what other people think about it, and if they think it's worth the value of, you know, paying for it. So those are all good things to keep in mind before you pay for it. As we get moving, I kind of want to get into home title fraud. And this is a topic that we're asked about all the time here at SCDCA, especially whenever I go out and give presentations. It's one of the things that folks are always asking us about. So home title fraud, we'll get into that. If I can get my slides to progress here. Here we go. Now, you've probably seen or heard some of those ads on TV or the radio where they're talking about thieves being able to kind of steal that title to your home. And a lot of times they're going to offer a service that's supposedly going to prevent that home title theft. In these cases, the property would require an owner's signature to be forged, which of course is a crime. And if that forgery is happening, that, you know, that transaction is not going to be legitimate. So it wouldn't be kind of noticed or recognized by a court or anything like that. So that's kind of one of those things to keep in mind, that these crimes take forgery. So once that kind of forgeries happen, you know, that transaction would kind of be null and void. But to also kind of, you know, as you hear about all these, especially with the advertisements and all that, you want to be cautious of companies that promise that they can prevent fraud from happening. You know, nobody can really prevent a crime from happening before it happens. So that's kind of one of those things to keep in mind. And I do like to tell people that I've spoken to several of the Register of Deeds in our state, and they tell me it's an issue that they very rarely see. So it's not a common crime in the state of South Carolina. So keep that in mind. And kind of, you know, Register of Deeds might be one of those things that you haven't heard too much about, or you may not think very much about. So each county in our state has a Register of Deeds office, and they're going to record things like deeds, mortgages, tax liens, and other documents kind of pertaining to land transfers in that county. And the Register of Deeds, they're kind of own government office in 23 of the counties in our state. And in the other 23, the functions are performed by the clerk of court. So depending on where you live, it could potentially be the clerk of court who kind of handles all of those transactions. And the other half of the state, there is an actual Register of Deeds. So it's either going to be a Register of Deeds office that is its own separate entity, or you would go through the county clerk's website. And this link here on the SC Judicial Branch website, that is a great resource. And I'm going to click on that here real quick, just kind of give you a better idea of what this website looks like. And it's going to list out those counties that we mentioned there. So, the 23 that have their own separate government office for it, that will be listed. But if you go here to the county map, I'm going to pull that up real quick, and I'm going to pull up one that I know is its own separate one. We'll look at Berkeley County. And if you kind of scroll down, it will kind of list that Register of Deeds office for you there. It'll pull up the clerk of court, but if you look down a little bit further, it's going to show you the Register of Deeds office for that county. So that's a good resource to take advantage of. And again, that's all going to be on the SC Judicial Branch website. And if you download these slides, it's a great link to keep in mind there, and it will get you to that little county map where you can find all that contact information directly. Now, kind of more on the home title fraud subject. In our state, property documents must be signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and acknowledged by a notary public. And this is kind of set up so it will hopefully prevent somebody from, forging signatures and things like that. So if you have those witnesses and the notary public, hopefully there's that check on everybody that's going to in the room, and there's a little bit more kind of checks and balances there with that. And, the Register of Deeds also say that, a lot of times lenders are going to perform their own kind of title searches and things like that before they loan money to somebody for a property search. And they're doing that as well so they can protect that money that they're loaning. They don't want to give money over to somebody who's, committing a forgery or something like that. So they're kind of doing their own checks as well, too. So that's a kind of good checks on that process as well. And, one of the things that you're encouraged to do to be able to find signs of, title fraud or something like that would be credit monitoring or public record monitoring. But it is also kind of important to kind of keep in mind with those types of things that they can only notify you after a document has been recorded. So there's really no guarantee that fraud will not be attempted, but these credit monitoring and public record monitoring, they will kind of notify you as those things happen so you can kind of catch it quickly. I'll give you kind of a good example of this. A lot of counties may offer a monitoring service that's going to give you alerts that anytime that there's documents related to your name that are filed in those offices. And again, this is kind of an example of what the Berkeley County website has, and it's the service that they provide. And it's going to kind of give you in there, you put in names, things like that, that you want to set up alerts for, and it's going to send you an email notification anytime those documents are moved with that name. But kind of the important thing to keep in mind with that is if you have a common name and there's property that's, being transferred or something like that with that same name and it's a common name, you'll get those alerts for that. So you're going to want to double check that it's actually you or the name that you're kind of worried about, and make sure that all those other facts are kind of what they are. So especially if you have a common name, that's something to keep in mind. I hear about people worried about those types of things moving through their county sometimes. So, if you're setting up an alert with a name that's fairly common, you might be getting a few more alerts. So take a look at those documents pretty carefully before you kind of start taking action on that. And of course, if you're worried about these types of things with home title fraud, you're going to want to check in with your county register of deeds or that county clerk of courts, whichever one, depending on which state or which county you're living in. But you want to talk to them, kind of see if they offer this type of service. And if so, sign up through the service that they're offering. And a little bit of a couple of other quick additional tips. We've mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you want to check your credit reports at least once a year. Again, you're going to look for errors, unfamiliar records, unauthorized inquiries, things like that, especially if you're seeing accounts showing up that you didn't authorize. That might be a sign of something going on. You want to monitor your bills, but especially those utility bills. And if you're not getting those utility bills for that property, you want to notify that utility company right away, kind of see what's going on, make sure that somebody hasn't changed that property to, another billing address or something like that that's going on. If you find those things, notify those utility companies right away. And if you suspect identity theft, you can, again, file an identity theft report with our office, consumer.sc.gov, and there's our phone number on the screen too. But depending on kind of what's going on, especially if it's property, you're probably going to need to seek the advice of an attorney. And again, SC Bar has a referral service. If you need help finding an attorney, you don't have one kind of lined up already, they can point you in the right direction. They have a referral service, and we're happy to pass that information along to you too sometime. All right, now we'll kind of get into homeowners associations and some of the issues around them, and it can be kind of complicated. And again, we have two webinars that are on our YouTube page that kind of go into HOAs and a lot of the legal stuff around that. So we're going to give you kind of a quick overview today, but if you're interested in the HOA topics, our YouTube channel is a great place to go for those details. And we're going to kind of start with this little disclosure statement. So if you're buying a home, you must be told that it is part of a homeowners association, and you should be getting a document that has this little section on it. And the South Carolina Department of Labor, Licensing and Regulation, which you probably heard of, LLR, they create this form, and it's the South Carolina Residential Property Disclosure Statement. So a seller real property has to give you this disclosure if a home's governed by an HOA. So keep that in mind. You should be notified before the purchase. And again, if you're getting this and you're looking at buying a place that's in a HOA, you want to try to get a copy of the covenants and those bylaws beforehand, if possible. And, the reason we say that is those governing documents are going to set up how the HOA is going to operate. That's going to include the meeting details, the dues, the special assessments, elections, the collection process, all that stuff that you want to know. And a lot of times they can also kind of limit how you use your property. So it's a good idea to get a lot of those details beforehand. And once you get them, you want to kind of know what those fees are going to be. One thing to keep in mind when you're trying to decide if you can afford that home is, what are those annual fees for that HOA? And another thing to kind of look at too is, do they have money in reserve? Kind of the thing to keep in mind with that is you want to check to see if they have enough money on hand for capital improvements. So if they have to impose a special assessment, that might be money that you have to pay or pitch in if they don't have money on hand for some of those projects. So that's going to be in addition to those standard dues. So just kind of look at how much money they might have in reserve. And you also kind of want to ask how often those dues can change. When was the last time they were increased, or the last time a special assessment was imposed? Keep those things in mind too. And you also want to ask yourself, what do you get from the money? You want to kind of see what the services are that they're offering. You also want to look at those governing documents and see kind of what they're maintaining for that money. Are they keeping up with all the common areas, the roads, if there's a dam on the property or in that housing development? You want to take a look at all of those things and kind of know what they're doing with all that money. You also kind of want to pay attention to the collections policies and their process. What we mean by that is just kind of, if you violate a HOA rule, what are the fines? Are they going to pose a lien on your home? Just kind of know that those are often tools that the HOA is using to kind of enforce those rules that they might have and collect on those fines and fees that they levy. And last, again, kind of mentioned it a second ago, but you kind of want to check for any restrictions that they have on the property. So know they're going to limit how you can do landscaping. Maybe if you can build another structure on the property. Some places will limit, what guests can do if they're coming into the area or something like that. Garbage cans, if you can put them on the street, what days you can put them on the street, all that, parking, pets, all of those things are kind of things to keep in mind, especially if there's particular things that are important to you. Just kind of know what those restrictions are going to be beforehand. And all right, as you're also kind of looking for it, you kind of want to get a little bit of additional information from the seller whenever possible. And one of the things you might want to do is kind of look at those minutes from the past year that they have. And you might also want to ask them for any newsletters that have been sent out from the HOA, and that might give you a little bit of additional info about kind of the community, how it operates, things like that. Then you want to ask in writing if the HOA is currently, or the home is currently in violation of any of the rules or anything like that. So you don't want to be kind of holding the bag for somebody else. If the previous homeowners had some violations or something about that, you don't want to be responsible for their violations. So you want to make sure all that stuff is kind of taken care of before the home purchase has gone through. And as you're kind of looking at buying, you might want to do a few other little things too. One of them would be attending an HOA member or a meeting. You kind of want to look at the board members, see how they interact with the homeowners, pay attention to any of the issues that have been raised. You might want to talk to some of the neighbors, see, what they think about the HOA and how it functions. You can also kind of, again, do some of those simple online searches. Look for complaints, and I'll kind of show you our complaints section a little bit. We do take HOA complaints, so you can search the Consumer Affairs complaint database, but you also kind of want to do those online searches and see what people may be saying about the HOA online. And again, you might want to have an attorney look at those HOA governing documents. And I know that costs a little bit of money up front, but it kind of might save you that headache on the other end, or it might kind of save you money on the back end as well from paying those things for the attorney to look at it first, so you don't, kind of end up with a headache later on with things that you didn't know about that were in those governing documents. And they can be rather complicated depending on the HOA. So, that's kind of one of those reasons we say an attorney could go through all those specifics for you and kind of help you figure out what's in there and how it might impact you. And so SCDCA does have a very specific role in the state's HOA law. So again, I kind of want to just stress I'm not an attorney, but we will kind of cover some of these legal things for you here quickly. This is kind of a quick guidance of some of the things that we do and don't do as far as HOAs go, and kind of start with some of the we do not things. So SCDCA does not regulate HOAs in the state. We do not administer or enforce the state's HOA Act. So that's important to stress for you. So what can we do? We can take HOA complaint, mentioned that just a second ago, and we ask for very specific data for those HOA complaints, and that's because we share an annual report with the governor and General Assembly. So we put that report on our website, consumer.sc.gov, and we kind of present it to the public as well with that. And we also do general HOA education for homeowners, kind of like the webinar and the presentation you're watching right now. So those are kind of things that we do as far as the HOA Act. And it's important to note that state law does not give SCDCA enforcement authority over HOAs. So again, we cannot force an HOA or the homeowner to participate in the complaint process, and we cannot require a specific outcome, and we cannot attempt to settle the dispute for you. So what can SCDCA do? Well, we cannot provide legal advice, but we can kind of give you that broad education of laws related to HOAs in our state. And again, we don't have that administration or enforcement authority, so that's kind of why we can't provide those legal details on those specifics. And again, a lot of these times they're very complicated, especially if you have governing documents that go through a lot of things. They can all vary widely from HOA to HOA. So again, you might want to have an attorney who can look over the very specifics of your HOA and your documents and kind of give you those overviews of what may apply to your situation. So why should you file a complaint with SCDCA if we can't take action? The big thing is your issue may be resolved through that voluntary mediation process. Sometimes, just writing those complaints out in a thoughtful way of what you want to have happen and what has happened and kind of what you would like to see going on. Sometimes that might help resolve things or at least find a common ground. So sometimes that helps you out that way. And again, that complaint information is going to be included in the annual report to the governor, General Assembly. They're looking at that data to decide if changes need to be made to state law or if things should be, the way they are now. So, all of these complaints that are filed, that helps provide that information to them about kind of what's going on and what may or may not need to change. So that's important information to get. So in order to file a complaint with a HOA, you can go to consumer.sc.gov. And again, you always want to look for that How Do I button, and that's going to give you the little file a complaint. And it's going to be the first drop down that's right there. Then you'll see a screen that's kind of like this. And that's going to be our consumer complaints page. And you'll see that HOA complaint, kind of where the big arrow is, there's that second menu down. That's going to give you all the information you need. And it's going to open up this other little portal here. And then you can submit your complaint either online through our online database there, or you can download that complaint form, print it out, mail it to us, whatever way kind of works for you best there. But I would highly encourage you to do the online complaint process because it's going to give you a lot faster access and things like that. So that's going to be a great tool for you. All right, then kind of with those HOA complaints, I keep saying, we give that information to lawmakers and things like that. So what you're going to need to do is make sure you download or fill out the HOA questionnaire. It's that supplemental form there. And that's going to be all those specific questions that lawmakers want. So in order for us to kind of process these, we do have to have this information. So I can't stress enough how important that is for you to fill out all those details on that additional questionnaire there. And that's going to be all that information that state lawmakers want and that we include in that annual report. So, if that form is not filled out, we're not able to process that complaint involving that HOA any further. And if you kind of want to learn a little bit more about HOAs, the HOA education page, you'll see it on our website there. Best place to go. We've got the address there at the top of the screen. You should see that there. But if you look under the consumer resources, a little tab there in the greenish blue there, you'll see that consumer resources. And then once you've kind of clicked on that, you'll see under help for homeowners, you'll see the HOA education page. And again, that's consumer.sc.gov. You'll see all that listed there. And that's going to give you a lot of additional information on the various HOA laws. And it's also going to kind of give you access to those HOA reports that we've mentioned throughout the presentation here in this section. What you see on the right screen there is kind of that HOA report page. And that's going to give you access to an Excel sheet. You should see that there. It's one of the Excel sheets that's going to let you kind of search through, and you can look at your county. You can look up the name of your HOA. You can do a lot of different types of searches in that database and kind of see what's going on around you. And that might be something that's useful for you, especially if you're trying to find that background information on a particular HOA. That might be good resource for you to kind of get an idea of, some of the things that other people in those communities may be dealing with. We also have information on that page about the past 7 years, and that's kind of how long this HOA law has been in effect for South Carolina. So you can go through some of that data for the past 7 years and kind of get a little bit more information about how HOAs work in the state. And you'll also see that executive summary there is going to give you a lot of details kind of about 2024 calendar year and kind of what was going on with complaints that came into our office. And again, if you've downloaded, and I did not mean to click that, but if you downloaded our presentation here in the chat section, it will take you to those reports and things like that. So it's good to keep in mind. And our HOA education page does have a lot of additional information that I'd like to point out to you. So you'll see a lot of those little PDFs that just popped up on the screen. You can view those, you can download them, and hopefully it'll answer a lot of the questions that you may have regarding homeowners associations. And again, a lot of the information's on our YouTube page too. So if you're on YouTube, you can find some of the presentations our attorneys have done that go into a lot more great detail on homeowners associations. All right, so I want to kind of get wrapping things up on contractor scams and some of the things you may see regarding home repairs, things like that. Some cases, scammers might actually pose as contractors and they might promise to do some work around your house, but then they might leave your home in kind of worse shape than when it was, before they started that work. And they may even damage your home. They may overcharge you. They may take your money and run, basically, without performing any of those services. So just kind of keep that in mind. I always tell people you want to stick to those local folks that, you can track down. You don't want to just use the people who show up at your door randomly. If it's a company that, is kind of built in your community and involved in your community, those are always good places to kind of start. And of course, as I just mentioned, you kind of want to be aware of those scammers that might knock on your door looking for business, especially if they're claiming, hey, I'm just coming through and I'm happen to be on your street today and saw what you needed. And a lot of times they may claim that they have materials left over from a previous job. That's something we hear about from time to time. And a lot of times, and I say this with all types of scams, they're going to protect or pressure you to make an immediate decision about whatever it is. So, anytime somebody's saying that you have to act now, that's kind of one of those quick red flags to watch out for. And they might ask you to pay for everything up front, or they might ask you to only give them cash. That may not be the best idea, especially if they're just showing up to your door out of the blue, because if you're handing over cash, you don't really have a way to, check up on who they are and all of that. Also kind of be cautious anytime you're asked to get all the required building permits. A lot of contractors, things like that. If there's permits, they probably know the process, to go through and get all those permits necessary for building in that area. In some cases, they may even suggest using a lender that they know in order to pay for all the work. So be a little cautious of that. You always want to kind of know the person you're borrowing money from and using lenders that you know and trust. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And of course, anytime you're doing this type of work, you always kind of want to know a little bit about the contractor, and you kind of want to find people that you know and trust. You want to check them out, right? So maybe get references from friends, neighbors, coworkers. Again, you always want to kind of do those searches online. Search for the word scam, search for the word complaint after the name of the company or the name of the person involved. And that's going to give you a lot of information. You might also want to verify some of the details they give you. You can ask to see their business permit, things like that. If they're a contractor, they are likely, again, licensed through Labor Licensing and Regulation, LLR. A lot of cities and counties will require specific licenses for contractors. So if your town or your county requires those, you might want to double check, make sure that the person you're considering hiring has those licenses with that city or that county. And you can also kind of ask them for proof of insurance. A lot of people, I just had some work done in my house, and a lot of these, legitimate people will have all that insurance proof on their websites and things like that too. So just kind of keep those things in mind as you're looking at these types of information from those contractors. And again, it's always a good idea to get multiple bids from contractors. That way you kind of know ballpark range of, what that job may cost. And it's going to give you, a little bit better idea if you're getting a good deal or not, or kind of if they're in range with everybody else. Usually they're all about the same, depending on the project and the work involved. But you also kind of want to make sure you have, again, a completed copy of the contract. You understand everything on it and all of that. And you don't want to pay up front. You only want to make those final payments after the job is done, you're satisfied, and everything's kind of lined up and looking good for you. So keep that in mind. And one thing, and I kind of mentioned it at the very start when we were talking about the SCDCA, but you can visit our website and our background of business page to kind of look up various state agencies, see if they're licensed with a particular agency. And you can also use our complaint database. I'm going to click on that link real quick for you, just kind of give you that idea. Again, you'll see the licensee lookup. You can kind of click that. And then we have some of these quick links to different state agencies that may oversee a different industry depending on what the situation is. If it's somebody we license, you would click the licensee lookup there. And if you need to search a complaint, you can click the little search complaint button. So that background of business page is a great resource for folks and might kind of point you in the right direction there. And kind of one of the other good spots to look, especially with contractors, again, Labor Licensing and Regulation in our state, LLR, they handle a lot of the contractors, and I'm just going to click their license page here real quick. And that will give you a quick little look at their website, and then you can kind of scroll through whatever type of contractor you're looking for, or whatever the particulars are there, and then you would hit select. So that's a good resource to start to as well, and that's the LLR licensee lookup page. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that resource. I want to give you a few more links, things to look at. So if you've downloaded the PDF, you can get that in the little chat section there, and you'll have access to these links. Help for Homeowners is a page that we have at SCDCA that has a lot of resources. SC Department of Insurance, they've got a lot of frequently asked questions there on home warranties. So that might be a place to start if that's something you're looking at. Again, SC Housing had a lot of that information on the programs that are available for home buyers, and might be able to help you out with some of the home repair issues as well. So that's a good resource for folks to start at. We've got information on HUD, the Federal Housing Administration there. So if you got that link, that might be something helpful. And then we've got some kind of additional federal resources. This is a Federal Reserve link that's going to take you a couple of different things on foreclosures and things like that. And again, anytime that, especially if you're looking at credit reports and think that you're a victim of identity theft or don't really kind of understand some of those things that are showing up, think you're a scam victim, you can always contact our office. If you have complaints involving some of these businesses, HOAs, you can file those complaints with us. Consumer.sc.gov is our website. We've got our phone number there. If you're really not kind of sure what step to do, you can always give us a call, and we'll kind of help you out, decide if, if it's an identity theft situation or if you need to file a complaint or whatever. And we kind of walk you through that process a little bit. Our number's right there on the screen. Again, consumer.sc.gov is a good spot. But I like to tell people with our phone number, we do have a real live person who answers the phone. You're not going to get, one of those options to press 2 for this, press 4 for that, things like that. You will get a actual person who's going to help you there. We thank you for coming and joining us this week. And we hope you will be with us next week. And until then, thank you very much. And we'll see you. Bye-bye.